Good evening, Councillor Raza. Can I just check that you can hear us, please?
Yes, I can hear you now, but in the room, I couldn't hear anything. I'm assuming that switched off.
Yes, that was the case. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Cabinet meeting on today, Wednesday, the 25th of January. I make it 7 p.m, so we shall begin. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Wall, and Councillor Raza is joining us hybrid. There are no urgent matters. There are potentially matters to be considered in private on items 7 and 8. I'd encourage members of the Cabinet and speakers, Councillor Malcolm, I believe you're speaking on one of them. Please, if you can, refrain from speaking on to the gold papers, but please indicate before doing so if you wish to. I'd encourage you not to do it on the basis that we would have to clear the public gallery, and there are members of the public with us today, so please avoid doing that. Declarations of interest, Councillor Blacker.
Yeah, Chair, just draw your and members' attention to my published declaration of interest. I have checked with the monetary officer, said non-pecuniary interest on the Warren Farm item.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. As a leaseholder of in a council property, I have an interest in item 9.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? I don't believe there are. So we move to the minutes of the last meeting. I direct Cabinet to the minutes. Are there any corrections? And if so, if not, then they are. Can I ask that they are agreed? Agreed. Thank you. No appointments to subcommittees or outside bodies. So I move to Environmental Enforcement Services Contract Extension, Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks authority for us to extend and enhance our current contract for environmental enforcement in the borough, and it will mean that we are able to add to our enforcing against idling, skips on the pavement, builders mixing concrete on the pavement, and illegal crossovers, in addition to the work we already do in this area, and it will be at no cost to the council. So I recommend this to the Cabinet.
I believe there is a question from Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Malcolm.
Thanks. I don't need to stray into the gold papers. The original contract had 3 boroughs in it. This one doesn't mention Barnet, but I know there's been some talk about that. Are Barnet leaving? And if they're not written down in the report, how come that's the case? In paragraph 3.4, I can see what looks like a disappointing level of 70% of FPNs are paid. Is this consistent over the past couple of years, or is it increasing or decreasing over the past couple of years? And lastly, if this support is agreed and implemented, noting paragraphs 1.3 and 1.4, it appears that the council can re-tender to a new or existing contractor without any external scrutiny. Is that correct?
Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. I think in terms of, I'm just going back on your questions. Sorry, Councillor, could you just confirm the first question again? I've got you with the 2 marked.
It related to the 3 current boroughs.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And why Barnet is not mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Yeah, sorry, I was confused because Barnet isn't part of the contract. It's Ealing, Harrow and Hounslow. They're the 3 boroughs that are involved in the contract. If you see it on the first page of the report, it makes that clear. It's Ealing, Harrow and Hounslow that are part of that contract. The other question that you asked was on whether there would be scrutiny. So we always operate our procurement in this way, that we agree the parameters of what it is we're looking for, and then we've got set criteria on how we score tenders coming forward. So we make clear what it is that we want on a political level. And like I say, we've laid out that we want additional services from the current contract, but we will go back out to market with that, similar spec, and we will look at then what comes in. But all of that is done in consultation with the cabinet member. And there is always the potential for councillors to ask questions or intervene during that process. We're very open to that, and that's how all of our contracting works. This isn't a huge contract, I should also say. It's quite a small contract, and as I say, it does cover 3 boroughs. It has worked really well. I think residents are really positive about it, because it does mean that kind of behaviour that we see where people drop cigarettes outside tube stations or just drop litter on the street regardless, we do enforce against that, and this is the contract that does that. This is what allows us to do that, and it doesn't cost the council any money. You've asked about the notices and the 70% payment of notices. That's actually a very good rate of payment of notices. That's a really, really positive rate. So we're actually doing very well. And one of the reasons that we're doing so well is because the contract we have with Kingdom is about it focuses on the quality of their enforcement. So we make sure that they're actually enforcing where it is the right thing to do, and they've done it within the rules. We include they all wear body camera as well, so that we make sure they've actually done it to the letter of the law. And as a result of that, we've got quite a high rate of payment of those fines.
Okay, thank you. I turn to Cabinet to see if there are any questions or contributions. If there are none, I'll direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask that they are agreed. Item number 8, Housing Procurement Strategy, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to introduce this report on behalf of Councillor Wall, who unfortunately can't be here. As the report indicates, what we're looking at here is we've taken a broad review of our approach to procurement across all elements of housing to seek to amend and we believe improve the approach we're going to take. Certainly gladdens my heart, given my portfolio, to see the focus there's been on achieving maximum value for money. And I think the paper is very strong on that. Colleagues will, of course, have read it all, but I'll particularly draw your attention to paragraphs 2.2.4, the principles of which we operated, in 2.2.5, the lot structure for the procurement process as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I look to Cabinet, see if there are any questions or contributions. Okay, if there are none, I will then direct you to the recommendations in the report and ask that they are agreed. Item number 9, Housing Revenue Account, HRA, budget year, MTFS, and the 30-year business plan. Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. I propose this report on behalf of Councillor Longwall, who's not here, but can I say this is one of the most important aspects of council business. It's the HRA annual report as well as the 30-year business plan. It is a comprehensive report, so I will just deal with some of the key aspects of this report. First of all, I think people should be aware that the council is a landlord for 16,689 homes, of which 10,748 are rented, so the others are leaseholders. This report seeks to invest £276 million of capital to build 1,800 genuinely affordable homes, which will all be in the HRA, which will be at council rents, so it will be social rents. This report also seeks to invest 20 million towards climate change proposals to make our homes much better to live in. 1.6 million new investment into a fire safety team, with a 5 million capital investment in that process. £1 million of new investment to tackle the issues of damp and mold in our housing stock. That's additional 1 million, as well as what we currently invest. Also, £1 million investment to support tenants during the cost of living crisis, as increases in charges, the report indicates, are kept below inflation, but there are some increases, so the report outlines what they are. But this report does indicate that we are keeping it below inflation, and we are seeking to invest in our housing stock, of which we have a large number. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions or contributions from Cabinet? The only thing I'd add is that, you know, the consequence, of course, of the sort of 7 weeks of economic chaos has been that we've seen increases in interest rates well above, I should say, that which was anticipated, and inflation within sort of our economy that is very much biting. And this is a key element of a cost of living crisis that is now being passported onto both those with mortgages, but for us as a local authority, to families who are living in social rented properties, who need decent living incomes, and they need genuinely affordable homes that need to be safe and secure. And unfortunately, it feels like we're getting even further and further away from that position as the economy really does start to bite. So we hope, and officers have worked incredibly hard on this, to ensure that we are delivering great quality in our stock, not just the stuff that exists, but also our house building programme going forward too, and that we can not only deliver our pledge to deliver 4,000 genuinely affordable homes, but ensure that every single one of those homes in our stock and the ones that we build is zero carbon and, of course, secure and safe and healthy. So I direct members to the recommendations in the report, and I ask that they are agreed. Ofsted Focus Visit, October 2022, Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. So this Cabinet paper notes the positive feedback from the Ofsted Focus Visit of our front door service and the significant progress made since the 2019 full Ofsted inspection. We were credited for our wraparound support and timely response to our most vulnerable children and families. A return visit from the Department for Education in December further endorsed the progress that we're making towards providing an excellent service to our care leavers in Ealing. This report is more for noting. There's no decision to be made. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any contributions? The other thing I think that's also in the report is the wonderful letter from Mark Riddell, who's the advisor on care leavers and looked after children for the government. And actually, if you read that letter, not just in terms of our Ofsted journey from requires improvement to good, which I think we'll be in a solid position to be in, I think what that letter and our focus visit tells us as a council is that we're making significant progress. And in fact, some of the areas of that activity is exemplary. So I think officers are to be absolutely commended for what has been a difficult journey, but one where we are seeing great strides and progress. So I thank Councillor Nagpal and officers too. So I direct Cabinet to the recommendation in the reports to note the progress. So is that agreed? Agreed. The review of housing allocations policy, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal fits with the principles of the administration to be open, honest and transparent with the residents of the borough. Since this allocations policy was last reviewed in 2012, in the absence of any credible national housing policy, we've seen the demand for housing increase way ahead of the capacity of ourselves or other social housing providers to bring it forward. As a result, we have currently a series of bands, priority bands, one of which, Band D, has no realistic prospect ever of being allocated a home. And under this proposal, we want to be honest with people currently in Band D and everybody who may seek to apply for housing. And the consultation that we conducted was one of the key components was to remove Band D. There are more than enough people in bands A, B, and C to soak up such provision of housing as comes along. At the same time, we want to ensure that anybody in Band E who should in fact have been promoted to Band C or above in the interim period is reassessed to ensure that everybody is in the right place. And we've also, as paragraph 4 indicates, brought forward proposals to ensure appropriate prioritisation for other categories, such as our armed forces personnel and our young people in fostering and adoption. But I move.
Thank you very much. I look to Cabinet if there are no contributions. Councillor Munro, yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say, Chair, as part of the allocations, I know it was 11,000, but I think we were already up to 12,000 on our housing waiting list. And we are anticipating that there will be much more greater demand as a result of the cost of living crisis, and as private sector rents go up quite sharply in London. We are anticipating that our service will come under pressure in terms of people coming to us for housing.
Thank you very much. With that, I direct Cabinet to the recommendations in the report, and I ask that they are agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. The future of Warren Farm Sports Ground, Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair. In putting forward this report tonight, I'm aware that there has been, a long history of Warren Farm Sports Ground and a long history of discussion of the future of the site. And there is also, as a result, quite a lot of misconceptions, I guess, out there. And, there are things on social media that aren't always true, don't always reflect reality. And with that in mind, I thought it might be helpful in moving this report tonight to just put some slides up on the screen so I can share in particular some maps of the site so people understand where it is and its place within Ealing, and so that we can talk through, I guess, the facts of the site and the plans that we have, rather than, as I say, some of the misconceptions that I have seen going about. So if it's possible for officers to share slides. Great. If we could just put it on slide view, that's great. Then hopefully people can see it a little bit larger. Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks for that. So Warren Farm Sports Ground, it has been, as the name suggests, a sports ground for many years in Ealing, and generations of Ealing children went to Warren Farm Sports Ground. And I've put up here a map of the actual site and the sports ground as it was for many years. So the red line around this site is the border of Warren Farm. So this is the site that we're talking about tonight. That is the Warren Farm Sports Ground. And as you can see here, marked out on this map, we've got the layout of the sports ground as it was for many years. It included, you can see there's quite a lot on the site. It included football, it included cricket, it included netball, softball, athletics. I think even to this day, there's still some sand from the long jump remaining there. And a lot of that is still on the site. So this is what the sports ground was like, and it did provide those great facilities locally. However, we know that with a squeeze on local council budgets, when the buildings that are towards the centre of the site, and you can see the built up area, the centre of the site, when they started to naturally fall towards the end of their lives, there wasn't the money in the council budget at that time to upgrade them. And the site, really needed investment. As a result of this, the previous administration had discussions with QPR Football Club, and an agreement was reached for a new configuration of the site that would see, a lot of investment in the area, but, also, and here's that, thank you very much. This is the plan that was put forward at that time. So this is the QPR plan to use the site for a training ground. And as you can see from this, there was quite a maximisation of the land on the site. Now, just so we're clear, the land to the left is not actually Ealing Council's land. That land is owned by Imperial College. So if you can see, the QPR proposals covered actually, pretty much all of the site. It's really well covered with playing pitches, and this included, a number of like AstroTurf and a number of floodlighted pitches. And of course, you can see at the centre, there is a significant addition to the buildings on the site, where we've got, there's a show pitch included in this as well. So this was, I think kind of maximum impact development of the site. And this was what was put forward at that time. Now, sorry, just to go back to the QPR one for a second. Yeah, actually, although there were some concerns locally about these proposals, and they did end up being, appealed through the courts, actually it was accepted by the courts that this was a proposal that was acceptable for the area. So, at that time, it was seen that this was still acceptable, and it did go through the planning committee at the time and was agreed all the way to the High Court and the Supreme Court. However, that being said, QPR did pull out of that deal, and that deal is now off the table. And just to look at what the site looks like now, if we could then move on to the next slide. So this is the site aerially as it stands now. The red line is the border of the site. Again, the land to the left is not ours, so it's the land within the red line. You can still see there now, I think, the imprint of the sports facilities that we had there for many years. You can see cricket. You can see on this picture the imprint of where the cricket used to be, as I say, when it was in active use as a sports ground. And you can see, like the map I showed earlier, that the buildings are located towards the centre of the site, with also, car parking, etc., in that area. If we just move on then to looking a little bit more closely at the buildings. So we'll just look at the next slide. So this again is just a photograph, an aerial photograph of the buildings that are currently on the site, which have fallen into significant disrepair. Again, they're a little bit in off the road. So when I come to some of the configurations in the report tonight, some of them would actually move changing rooms, etc., closer to the road so that we can consolidate the open greener space. But right now, those dilapidated buildings are at the centre of the site. There's quite a lot of hard standing that's there at that point. And I should say at the moment, we've got, over the winter months, we also have Zippo's Circus on the land. They take up a fair bit of space as they park their vehicles there for Winter Wonderland in Hyde Park, but they're there quite a lot of the time over the winter months too. If we can just go on to the next slide, and it just gives you an idea of the dilapidation of those buildings that I mentioned. So these are some of the old buildings, the sports buildings that have fallen into serious disrepair, vandalized. But it does give you an idea, I think, of how important this site was for sports in Southall in 10 years ago. It was extremely important. It was basically the biggest open air sports site in the borough. And I think that gives you a feel of it here. But unfortunately, because of various delays, etc., it lays empty and disused at this point. So I just wanted to then look at the local area and where Warren Farm Sports Ground is situated. And if you have a look at this map that I've just put up on the screen, it's the level of health and disability in the borough compared to the national situation. And the darker pink colours mean much lower levels of health and much higher levels of disability. And if you see for Ealing that ill health and disability is concentrated in the Southall area and also in Northolt, but very significantly in the area that we're looking at today. So I think it's quite important to be aware of that. We're talking about an area of very serious health inequalities. And indeed, if you look at the mortality rates for people who live in Norwood Green, for example, compared to people who live in other wards of the borough, Norwood Green has got one of the earliest death rates in the borough. There's about a 7-year difference between when you might die in Norwood Green compared to other areas of the borough. That's a really stark statistic. It's a really, difficult thing to think of, but that's the reality of the area we're talking about today, where people, due to ill health, die much earlier than they ought to. And that's something that as a council, we need to address. We have a duty to address that. But let's look at the next slide. And the next slide is another map which shows us overcrowding in the borough and the density of people's living in the borough. And again, if you can see, this is a sort of a zoomed in map, and you can see there Southall to the left. And you can see that people in Southall live in a very built up area. It's an area that does experience a lot of the problems that come with that kind of high density built up housing. And it is, from a council perspective, again, it is our duty to make sure that residents in Southall have access to sport and access to open air. And that's what we're attempting to do with the report that's in front of you today. But I think what the map also shows is there is this massive area in the middle of the map where it's open, it's more open space. There's not that density of homes, whereas in the Southall area there's a real lack of space to put the kind of sports facilities that we're talking about tonight. If we can just go then to the next slide. So where does all of this leave us? That's kind of the background, I suppose, to where we're at this evening. When the current leadership of the council took over about 18 months ago, we were very clear that we wanted to secure the future of Warren Farm Sports Ground. And we said from the outset that what we wanted to try to achieve was a win-win for the whole community. We wanted to achieve a compromise that could bring together both the requirement for sports facilities in the area, for football pitches and for cricket grounds, at the same time as making sure that we addressed our climate change priorities. And so we looked at this space, and we were clear, as I say, from the outset, that it was a compromise that we were looking for. And we knew that we weren't going to be able to please all of the people all of the time. But as a council, we have responsibilities to balance the needs of everybody in the community. And that's how we approached this. That's how we approached Warren Farm Sports Ground. And the great news is, and it's in the report tonight, that we were able to speak to Imperial College, who own the land to the left on this slide. And we were able to speak to them and negotiate a deal with them, which means they are willing to give us their land to manage on a 99-year lease without us having to pay them a penny. And as a result, we're able to incorporate that into a much expanded site. That gives us a much bigger area of ground when we're looking at balancing the needs of all of the residents in the local community. And what it does mean is we're able to bring forward proposals tonight that will mean that much of the land, the majority of the land, at least 62% of the expanded Warren Farm, will now be made into a local nature reserve. And this is so much of a step forward from where we've been over the last number of years with this site. We're now able to say that this huge area, 62% at least, will be declared a local nature reserve. And we will be able to minimise the area put aside for sports pitches to a maximum of 38%. So this, I think, is a win-win for the community. This is what we were looking for the last 18 months. And we've spent time in those 18 months, meeting with local groups, and I know some of those local groups are here tonight and discussing their aspirations for the site. Also asking local residents how they currently used the site, and we did a consultation on that last year. And of course, we also collected evidence for our indoor and outdoor sports strategy. And I should say that the indoor and outdoor sports strategy was very clear in the need in the local area. And it found that we have a real lack of football pitches and cricket pitches in that area. We need at least 4 to 5 cricket pitches to meet demand over the next number of years. And we also need football pitches in particular to address the need for the huge growth in women's and girls football. And a lot of that, of course, we saw recently with the Lionesses' victory. That's made this even more of an issue that we need to address. And so that sports strategy has made clear that we do need to ensure that there are those facilities for the community over the next 10 years. So we have managed, I think, to achieve the best of both worlds, a win-win, as I say, with the cooperation of Imperial College. And we're really grateful to Imperial College for agreeing the lease with us. They're very keen to be involved in what will be London's largest rewilding scheme. Imperial are very keen to be involved. For them, that is their interest in this project. They want to rewild the land. And what we will be doing, what this report lays out, is that rewilding we want to do hand in hand with local people. In applying for local nature reserve status, you need to put together a management plan that's agreed with Natural England. And we would want to agree that management plan with local people so that we can all work together to maximize the ecological value of the site. And we've committed to doing that in tonight's report. If we just then move down to the next slide. In terms of the remainder of the site, where we'll be looking at football pitches potentially and cricket pitches, we've also included in tonight's report some suggested configuration of what those facilities might look like. I should emphasize that these are suggestions and nothing has at this stage been decided. What we are intending to do is, if we make this decision tonight, to put together both a feasibility study to see what could actually be included in the part of the site. So as I say, the smaller part of the site, and we would put together a feasibility study that is costed, because it's quite important that these facilities wash their face. We'll need to look at whether we can potentially get support from some of the sports bodies like the English Cricket Board or the FA. So that costing and feasibility study will be extremely important. And we would also look at setting out the parameters for what we would be looking for in a partner who would provide these facilities. And those sets of parameters that we would want to set out, again, we would like to work with local people on how we minimize the impact on the rest of the site and how we ensure that this is a low impact development. And particularly, you can see in this first one, compared to some of the previous iterations of the site. This configuration has 3 cricket pitches, which would go a fair bit of the way towards delivering the sports strategies requirement for 5 cricket pitches, but it is simply cricket. And we do know that it's often, it may be financially difficult for a provider just to provide cricket, because a lot of the time the money is in football. And as I said, with the Lionesses, etc., and the need for women's football, it may be that this is a bit more difficult financially for a partner to be able to deliver. But we're suggesting that it is a possibility. We may get partners who would be willing to deliver something along those lines. We've also included configuration, the next configuration, If we could just move on to that. So this configuration, again, has 3 cricket pitches, and it's also got 6 football pitches and a changing pavilion. And as you can see there, as I said earlier, what we've tried to do with this is to consolidate the building down towards the bottom of the site, closer to the road, and that would be changing rooms, etc. So we very much tried to move them out of the middle of the site. And of course, we must remember that for these playing fields, they are playing fields. They are green open space. And what we've also done in these configurations is we've overlaid cricket pitches with football so that we minimize the impact on the rest of the site. And we're able to do that because the cricket and football seasons are different. So you can do that, and it's often done. And then if we just look at the final configuration, again, this is just a suggestion of what people might come forward to. This is the maximum we think you could manage to put on the site. We wouldn't want to go any bigger than that. As I say, we're looking for a low impact facility here. We're not looking for even what used to be on the site previously when the council ran it. And certainly it's massively different to the proposals that were put forward by QPR. And as I say, this does mean that we are able to, all of the green hatched area along the top, we are able to make into a local nature reserve. And that is 62% of the site compared to 38% of the site for green open sports pitches. And I should also say at the top of the site there, you can see there is an area that's marked out, the line around it, which is Hanwell Meadows. And we're also in tonight's report recommending that those meadows are also declared nature reserve. So it is actually a slightly larger site. To the right of the site, that you can just see on the edge of the frame, there is also a green area. That piece of land is owned by the Earl of Jersey. And we have even greater ambitions for this site in that we would also like to persuade the Earl of Jersey to get involved in London's biggest rewilding project. We have had discussions with the Earl and the Earl's people, shall we say, and at this point, he's not willing to enter into a similar arrangement as we have with Imperial College. However, we are not giving up, and we will continue to negotiate with the Earl of Jersey. And I think the further we go along the road of declaring this a local nature reserve and putting the management plan in place, the more likely it is that eventually he may come along with us and join in that local nature reserve. I wanted to just finally, Chair, if I could, just look at a final picture from the air of the local area. So I think we've seen that Southall is a really, really built up area. But this site from the air, if you can see to the right, I can see Althorne Park School picked out, and to the left, you've got Norwood Green, you've got Auntie's Cafe, and so you can see where all the housing is. It's all kind of grey on the different sides, but there is a very large area in the centre here, which is a whole collection of green spaces. Warren Farm is one of these green spaces, and you can see it towards the middle top. There's a red marker there. And so our Warren Farm sports ground is just one part of quite a well, a very green area, basically, in the middle of some quite built up areas. So putting sports facilities back in Warren Farm and allowing our young people to again play football on Warren Farm playing fields, to again play cricket, I don't think is going to overly impact the access to green spaces in the area, because it is an area of significant green space at the moment. So just to finish then, Chair, as I say, there has been a long history to this site, but during all of that long history, what we've seen is children in Southall missing out on the chance to play football, missing out on potentially life chances due to the impact on young people's health from not accessing sports facilities. We have seen that over the last number of years of delay and uncertainty. What this report does is it finally brings some certainty to Warren Farm Sports Ground. It brings a compromise that I think all sections of the community can get behind. And tonight, I would ask that we will support this proposal, move forward with London's biggest rewilding project, and we make Warren Farm Nature Reserve and Warren Farm playing fields both something to be proud of and something for future generations to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costigan. We do have two sets of questions from the opposition parties, and we have had a request to speak by a member of the public. So I'd invite Samantha O'Connor, if you want to come forward to the public speaking position next to our monitoring officer. I'll call you after I call on first Councillor Gallant to ask your question, and I urge you to ensure that it is a question.
Thank you, Chair. It will be a question, and thank you for the report, for the portfolio for the report, and thanks for Chris Bunting for his work that he's put into it too. Given the absence of public transport in the area, is it not true that access to any future sports ground at Warren Farm will have to be primarily by car and bus? Why is this reality not being discussed and planned for at this early stage? Second question. If extensive vehicular access is inevitable, how can such a civic amenity possibly be developed in the same confined area as a local nature reserve, which currently houses a delicate breeding population of skylarks? The area in its current form is extensively used by the public, particularly dog walkers. Will the public continue to have this level of access to the site? And finally, are we not making the classic mistake of trying to appeal to everyone and achieving nothing?
Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Councillor Gallant. Just to go through them one by one. So in terms of connectivity, I guess the first thing we have to remember is this is in terms of the football pitches and the cricket pitches that we're proposing, this is on a smaller level than the site previously held. So, 10 years ago, previous to that, when it was operated as a council facility, we had more facilities on site, and yet people were able to get there and the site worked. I've seen some people say in emails and on social media that it wasn't a successful site. It wasn't a successful sports facility. In fact, it was extremely successful. It was a very successful sports facility, and it was well used and people were able to get there. But of course, we're only at the start of this project. We're only setting out now what it could look like. When we get to the point, as I say, we have to do a feasibility study, and we'll be putting together costings and a spec parameters for what the site might look like. When we get to a position where people come forward with plans, where partners have ideas about how they might deliver this, that is when we will need, of course, to look at things like active travel plans, how we get people to the site. I know already our transport planners are looking at cycle routes, and there's at least 3 cycle routes that we might be able to open up to be able to allow further access to Warren Farm. But we will have a full active travel plan and a transport plan. We are working with TfL to try and expand bus routes in Southall generally, and we'll certainly be pushing as this project continues to see if we can get more bus connectivity where that is required. But of course, we'll also have people walking to Warren Farm. You could see from some of the maps I showed that there's quite a lot of residential around the area. So people will also walk to Warren Farm as they did when it previously operated. I think that may have covered both your first and second question. I think your second question was how would we accommodate people getting, I think your first question was no one will get there. And your second question was loads of people will get there and how will we accommodate them? But if that's what you're saying, councillor, which is slightly contradictory, but like I say, The site has accommodated far more sports provision in the past. This is a much lesser proposal. You asked a question about access. I'm afraid I didn't write down what the rest of the question was. Could you just confirm that?
Yeah, sure. The access is accessed by the public at the
Oh,
moment.
sorry, yeah.
So will they have the same level of access going forwards?
Yeah, so the access,
Particularly dog walkers.
yeah, you mentioned dog walkers in particular, and yes, you will still be able to walk your dog around Warren Farm. And like I said earlier, what we're talking about is cricket pitches and football pitches. And certainly I think people know that they are very accessible spaces, unless somebody's playing on them, but they can be accessed by the public. The final question, oh yes, your final question was, are we trying to appeal to everyone? I would like to try and achieve here something that the majority of people can get behind. And I don't think that's a bad thing for us to have an ambition to achieve. I think Ealing Council, in looking at this administration, we have unapologetically been trying to see what we could do to deliver on the aspirations of the majority of the community. And that's why we've looked at how we can deliver what young people in Southall need in terms of sports provision, as well as what we want for the ecological and biodiversity impact of the site. So we have been trying to deliver for everyone. I think the council, when we look at any bit of land in the borough, we have to take a balanced perspective as to how could this land deliver the maximum benefit for the maximum number of people. And that's why we look on whether it could deliver housing, for example, on some sites, not on this site, but we discussed that on some sites, whether it can deliver sports facilities, whether it can be a park, whether it could be a school. We have to consider all of that when we look at any site in the borough. This site, Warren Farm Sports Ground, is already a sports ground. It is in our previous local plan as a sports ground, and it is also an area that people value for the biodiversity and for the ecological importance of the site. And what we've tried to do is balance both of those needs, both of those requirements into, as I say, a compromise that I think is a win-win for local people.
Councillor Malcolm, your questions.
Thank you, Chair. Was any consideration given to the council to having sporting facilities on the Imperial College land? And related to that, was there any attempt by the council to persuade Imperial College to do this instead of giving the land over to start a rewilding project that is already there from scratch? What will you do if Natural England do not support these proposals in the cabinet paper? Are you willing as well to take up Lagercan's recent offer of a few days ago, and they've got hundreds of volunteers around the borough to help identify land around the borough that can be used for sport that isn't at Warren Farm? And how come Ealing believes that it can have both skylarks breeding for sporting facilities, sharing the same space, when the evidence shows very clearly, we're talking experts, not just local experts, but people like Chris Packham, that skylarks need all of that space to breed on in Warren Farm, not just part of it. And then lastly, when I looked at the anonymous data from the recent Warren Farm consultation of a few months ago, only about 10% of respondents, and there was 1,400 of them, wanted football, cricket, or both on the site. Only 10%, so that it shows there isn't really the demand there. Why do you therefore not want to go ahead and agree with your own consultation? And therefore, will you, if you implement these plans, apologise to the 15,000 petitioners, which is a huge number of a petition, who recently signed that petition, 15,000 people.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Just in terms of your first question, your first question was about Natural England, I think. So we're going to apply for local nature reserve status, both for the Warren Farm site and also for the adjoining fields, the Hanwell Meadows fields. In order to get Natural England local nature reserve status, you do need a management plan, as I said earlier, and we're happy to work with local people. We're keen to work with local people on that management plan. And my understanding is that if we've got that agreed, and it's something that will help to protect and enhance the site, and particularly, looking at the Imperial College site, which at the moment is got horses on it, and is ripe for us to go in and put plans together to rewild it. I think we can come up with a great management plan. And I can't see any reason why Natural England wouldn't be delighted to hear that we had decided to make this a local nature reserve. This is a really positive move by the council, declaring all of this area a local nature reserve. And I feel quite confident that Natural England will welcome that and will want us to enhance that site and make it even better for local people. Your second question was about whether there's any other land in the borough that we could use instead of Warren Farm. And I think, Councillor Malcolm, you've already asked this question of officers, and I know officers have provided you with a very detailed response of every single space in the borough that they have looked at to check whether it would take football pitches or cricket grounds. And they've made it clear to you that we don't have anywhere else in the borough that is in our ownership, that isn't encumbered with restrictive covenants, or doesn't have some other access or other issue that would impact on delivery that would work compared to Warren Farm. They've been very clear, and they've given you the whole list, which I know that you're aware of. I think that you are well aware of that list. The other thing about Warren Farm is it's actually a great place for sports pitches. It's brilliantly served by drainage, which is an issue we have in lots of other areas of the borough, where we've got pitches that have quite bad drainage problems, including in Perryvale, for example. Again, I know the officer has explained to you that we might have to reduce by a pitch there due to the drainage issues. But Warren Farm Sports Ground has really great drainage. So it is, and that's why it was always used as a sports ground. It is a perfect place for the pitches that we're looking at. But we have looked at everywhere in the borough. There are some places here and there, and again, the officer has sent you the list where we might fit in one football ground or one cricket pitch. But what we need to do is make that financially viable. It's not really viable to just put in one football pitch somewhere. What we're proposing here, as I say, it would wash its face. It would be financially viable. Then you asked a question about skylarks, and I know that is an issue that some people have raised regarding their existence on the site. Like I say, the plans that we've got for Warren Farm, they are not plans that would see buildings, tall buildings, and an intensification of use on the site. They are plans for some dressing rooms and a couple of other ancillary buildings close to the road, which is, currently not really an area of green space, and also for wide open football and cricket pitches. Now, that leaves the land with those vistas that, skylarks like, and it also leaves a 62% of the expanded site for nesting, which is a massive area. We also, of course, know that there are skylarks in that greater green area, which I showed you at the end of the slideshow, including next door at Osterley Farm. So we do have other skylarks in the area, and that's in our own biodiversity action plan. We have made that clear. Also, as I say, this is just the start of a process. Our next steps as we go further along the line, not only will we be looking at travel plans and active travel plans, we'll be also looking at how we bring forward this plan whilst protecting the ecology and the biodiversity of the greater site. So we will have mitigations put in place. we will be putting into the spec that we put out for partners to respond to. We will be including that we want whatever is proposed to respect the biodiversity and valuable ecology of the site. And we will seek to mitigate any impact on the current flora and fauna. I think your last question then was, oh yes, it was about the consultation that we did last year. And so there's a number of pieces of evidence that we have used to come to this proposal in front of us tonight. And one of those pieces of evidence was indeed the consultation that we did with local people last year. And that consultation really sought to understand how the site is currently used. And people did come back to us and tell us that they currently use the site for dog walking, etc. But of course, the site's not currently usable for football or cricket. So we wouldn't expect people to come back and say that we use it for football or cricket. And I also need to make clear that that consultation was not a referendum. It was just asking people how they currently use the site. And tonight is about the people who never get listened to, young people in Southall. Well, I'm sorry if people don't have respect for young people in Southall, but they're never in rooms like this. None of us here are young people. I can't see a single young person here. They never get listened to. And I want to speak up for them tonight. Young people in Southall need sports facilities. We have seen the impact of poverty, overcrowding, and health inequalities on Southall. This proposal will help to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costigan. I just would remind the room that I understand that this topic raises passions, but we are going to conduct the meeting in an orderly way. At every stage in this process, the administration has been open, it's been transparent, and it's engaged many of the people who are currently in the public gallery in bilateral, trilateral, open discussion. That will continue to be the case well beyond this meeting and into the next phases of the work. So I appreciate that passions are running high, but I just would ask for calm whilst we proceed through today's business. We have had a request to speak from the public, Samantha O'Connor from Hanwell Nature. Samantha, you have 3 minutes to address Cabinet, and you are welcome to begin when you're ready.
Okay. So Warren Farm is not just another empty space of low ecological value, but it's already one of the finest examples of existing rewilding and the only home to skylarks in the borough, which both deserve the highest protection and consideration, which is outlined in your biodiversity plan. Whilst any land being put forward to be designated as LNR is a plaudable thing to do in a time of climate change, the decision also being taken tonight is to finalise documents, including a development brief, and it is this to which I speak now, as we believe this decision is premature, in that any potential decision to do so is not backed with sufficient up-to-date ecological assessment data or sufficient report detailing the required protection for skylarks and nature on the site. Therefore, we have shared our concerns in a letter from my solicitor today with the chair and with Mr. Bunting that we had asked to be shared with you prior to this meeting. So I hope that you have had time to consider it. The main thrust of the letter was that we believe it would be highly unwise to enter into a development brief before knowing what you are working with in terms of protection for skylarks and nature, and in terms of the land quality of the various areas in question. And we believe that without current ecological assessment and report with recommendations and requirements on how to protect the considerable nature on the site, we cannot see how the committee can rationally recommend to proceed to finalise the development brief and identify suitable delivery partners for the site. We also believe that Ealing Council should be commissioning a natural capital assessment on Warren Farm so that we might gain a balanced view as to what the meadow's worth to Ealing's residents as an educational centre and nature reserve in its entirety, and what the exact value there is in preserving that natural capital stock assets Warren Farm provides, and the flow of benefits to residents and the economy. Therefore, we request that this decision be delayed until such reports and assessments are produced, and also would like to suggest a scoping out exercise for the potential siting of any new sports provision on Wincott Farm, which we would believe would be a positive conclusion all round and has existing transport links where Warren Farm does have not. We thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I do have a question, but I don't know if I'm allowed to have that.
By all means, Samantha, you've got a minute or so left, so you can ask your question.
I don't understand why we're talking about Imperial College land being included as part of the rewilding, when it's quite clear on your report, point 4.17, page 14, that the current tenants will be allowed to stay there under licence. Are we talking about Ealing Council becoming landlords for the stables, or are we talking about the Imperial College land being included in order to mitigate the disastrous loss of biodiversity on Warren Farm?
Thank you. Councillor Costigan, do you want to address the question, and then I'll go to other members of Cabinet for contributions?
Yeah, I'll just come back on that. So as I said, we're going to have a management plan, and we'll agree in that management plan how our rewilding is brought forward, both on the Imperial site and on the rest of the site. So all of that is up for grabs, and we are welcoming local groups like yourself, Samantha. You know, we have met, we've discussed this a couple of times, and in quite a constructive way. And I want to thank you for that, actually, and some of the other groups as well. But we have discussed it, and we would very much welcome your involvement in that. If I could quickly pick up, Chair, just on two other points. One is your points around the brief for what the site might look like. As the report makes clear, we're starting with a feasibility study. And a feasibility study will be looking at some of the points that you raised. So we actually have to check, first of all, this is our suggestion. This is our idea. We have to look now at whether it makes sense financially and it makes sense in all of the other ways that you raised. So that is the next step. And just finally you just suggested there another site, Wincott Farm. Just to say, Wincott Farm does not belong to us. It's not our site. It's also encumbered by restrictive covenants. So it's a site that we can't currently use. This is been hard fought for through negotiation with Imperial. It was very hard fought for. They are an organisation who, have a reputation to uphold publicly, and they want to support action on climate change. And we really welcome that they wanted to get involved with this with us. But I'm afraid the site that you mentioned is owned by, a private individual who is doing other things with the site. Other things with the site.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we know what that tenant is, we know what the landowner is doing with Wincott Farm, and certainly it's been an area that we've had to enforce on quite a few times. And I think it's the challenge, of course, with Wincott Farm is, it wouldn't accommodate one cricket pitch, let alone three. And of course, all of that was discussed, indeed, at Overview and Scrutiny Committee, when Councillors Malcolm and Gallant called in actually the sports strategy after it was discussed by Cabinet. So I think there have been extensive conversations about how and where in the borough we both have access to land and configurations of the provision of sports facilities. I have had from Cabinet a considerable number of requests to address. So I sort of look to volunteers as to who would like to go first. Councillor Donnelly, and then fine, yeah, I'll bring you in turn.
Thank you, Joe. I'll try to keep my remarks brief. I mean, it seems to me that there's two words come out of the debate that we have. One is loss and one is opportunity. And our responsibility as custodians of the borough, the land such as we own or we supervise, we administer, and the people who live within the borough, is to manage those responsibilities in ways which benefit as many people as possible in as many ways as possible. And we talked tonight about the loss or projected loss or feared loss or anticipated loss around wild spaces. But I ask the committee, the Cabinet, to cast its mind back a decade or more, when what was in the news was loss of playing fields, It was loss of access by young people to places where they would be able to participate in sport. And one of the great losses, one of the great side effects of the austerity decade was the loss of such space. And I don't think we should just move on and say, well, that was really unfortunate. And well, you know, that was then, nothing can be done about it. I think the weight of that responsibility is still with us. The shadow is still cast. And so when we look at what's in front of us tonight, I'm thinking in terms of opportunity to make some restitution for the loss that took place then. And I think what was striking about the presentation that Councillor Costigan put across was the way in which we're going out of our way to draw lines, literally, metaphorically, which seek to secure opportunity for both of the things that we're talking about. A major rewilding project, a significant restitution of playing space for some of the poorest, most disadvantaged, youngest people in the borough, who, as Councillor Costigan says, they're not filling in our surveys, and they're not likely to until they're quite a bit older. So I think the chances are there. But by complete chance, we've ended in a situation which looks like, when you see one of those documentaries about an old Cold War Air Force base, that's what Warren Farm looks like now. That is what those buildings, the dereliction needs to be addressed somehow. It needs to be addressed somehow. And I think that the chance is there to recognise that we can't return to what Warren Farm was before. You know, nature has stepped into the vacuum that was left behind when austerity ended the access to the playing fields. And nature has indeed changed what that area looks like. But I don't think that we, in conscience, can simply let that carry on, as it were, uncurated. And I think the future for this site lies in a partnership between the London Borough of Ealing and Mother Nature of some kind. And what the scale of it will look like, I think, as Councillor Costigan said, we're not predetermined on that. And I think the proposals, specific proposals in front of us to progress, to try to develop plans, are to be supported, and I will support them.
Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Costigan's slide on the health inequalities that I wanted to pick up on, because, you know, when we talk about the borough of Ealing, we think of leafy green, suburban Ealing, and that kind of lovely, healthy, nice, vibrant place we live in. We forget that there are those pockets of deprivation and stark inequalities across our borough, and the life expectancy drop from one end of the Uxbridge Road to the other is a stark inequality. Southall residents are far more likely to have diabetes, obesity than residents in my ward in Acton. And those are the challenges that we have to, as a council, contribute to meeting. And we said we would take a holistic approach to health, not just lobby for more GPs, not just lobby to stop the closure of Ealing's A&E, but a holistic approach to health that looks at what we can do in all aspects of the council to contribute to tackling health inequalities. So, you know, every year we will publish a Health of the Borough report that says how different departments of the council contribute to tackling health inequalities. So we said we would promote active travel. That's why we've invested in Let's Go Southall, cycling facilities along the Uxbridge Road. And as Councillor Costigan says, we're looking at more routes in Southall that would open up access to this site for active travel. We said we would put mental health on a par with physical health. So we're supporting initiatives like Great Mental Health Day in the next few weeks. And we also said we would invest in great leisure facilities. It's why we've set up the sounding board at Glenelg to get that reopened. And it's why we need to reopen the playing fields at Warren Farm for the future. I think I will leave it there. I think others have mentioned the other inequalities and the particular aspects of those inequalities we need to address. But these facilities have been closed for far too long, and there is a community we have not served terribly well by letting them remain dilapidated and unopened. And I look forward to seeing how we can work with the community to make sure both aspects of this project, the rewilding and the opening up of additional space in this area and the sports facilities, can come together with the community.
Thank you, Councillor Anand.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I've represented Southall Green coming up to 25 years this May, and Southall Green borders onto Norwood Green, and I really welcome the report today that we will be investing in new sports facilities in Southall. And I also welcome any further opportunities that will be discussed, and the most important issues of the widening the access of the sports facilities within the heart of Southall. And the report really outlines what Warren Farm remains a key strategic multi-sport, multi-pitch priority site for the council within Southall, and it, due to its location, the size, its capacities to meet the growing demand of the supporting activity that is needed in Southall. Our outdoor sports facility strategy actually highlighted the demand for football pitches, cricket pitches, and in particular, it's a viable case which can be presented to enhance Warren Farm sports grounds. So it really meets the needs of the Southall residents of our community and the supports for the community. We have the capacity and we have the opportunity to provide the formal and informal sports provision with high quality open space and of course the nature reserve provision that we wholeheartedly support and want to work with all the groups in the borough. But at a time when our investment in sports and recreation has seen gold-winning lionesses making history with the achievements of Chloe Kelly, we should be shouting proudly of our commitment in this area and coming together really to build more for our residents. And let's not forget, Chair, that Bend It Like Beckham put women's football in Southall on the map, and we want to keep it on the map in Southall. We want to improve the sports facilities that will benefit our local residents, our young people, and of course the grassroots of sports and active recreation. We want to build the sporting infrastructure in Southall, and it's been needed for many, many years, Chair. And I've said I've represented Southall for nearly 25 years. That provides residents and young people of all ages, abilities, and the backgrounds with the opportunity to be physically and mentally healthy. And we have the up-to-date evidence on what sports facilities are needed and where. And Southall is that place. And we cannot miss that opportunity that we have in our hands today. Lots changed in Southall in the last 10 years, and it's changed all over the world, which is why these new sports facilities are so much needed within Southall. I keep saying Southall because I don't really want to miss out on this opportunity, and we really need to grasp it with everything that we can to provide that facility. And the evidence is clear from our indoor and outdoor sports strategy that Southall area is in need of more sports facilities in general. It's including pool space, sports halls, and pitches for football and cricket, both of which we know there is a huge demand for. We've been speaking to local cricket clubs, and they've really indicated to us that they have anticipated increasing their membership and the number of teams that they field. Chair, these plans will shape up with detailed consideration, community engagement, and all the action plans, but we are able to articulate clearly what we believe our need is. Chair, we have an approach that aligns our commitments to public health and also to narrow the health inequalities, and our commitment to leisure and our commitment to invest in our borough to make it more accessible and livable for our residents. And I really support the report, and thank you Councillor Costigan, and to all the officers who've really done a lot of hard work, and yourself as well, Chair.
Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. For me, the ambition of having a nature reserve in Ealing that our young people can enjoy would be such a huge investment in their future. For young people to learn about and be inspired by nature is, such a wonderful thing. And as a Southall councillor, I've also seen firsthand how the local community and the schools are affected by the lack of sports facilities. Villiers High School in Southall, for example, has had to resort to using Southall Park for sports. So there's immense value in having access to local, high quality sports provision. And it would give young people, an opportunity to develop a healthy, active lifestyle and strengthening their mental health and well-being, and providing a safe outlet to socialize and make meaningful connections and give opportunities to try new sports and develop skills, allowing young people to reach their full potential, maybe giving rise to another Bukayo Saka or Chloe Kelly in Ealing, who knows, but wouldn't that be fantastic? Thank you.
Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues will know that as part of bringing forward the local plan, we've been looking at areas of the borough where there is deficiencies in terms of health provision, in terms of sports provision. So the local plan seeks to try and remedy some of those issues. So Southall actually does suffer from a deficiency in sports provision. That's very, very clear from the local plan, as well as health provision. So I look at it differently, I think, Chair, because I think Councillor Malcolm really sort of, in one of his questions, sort of made me understand again and again why people choose to use figures in ways which always advance their case. So he said from Southall, it was only a 10% sort of asking for sports facilities, as if that's a referendum. And we're very well aware that parts of our borough where very deprived members of our community can live, high, homelessness, overcrowding, as we saw from the maps, those communities do not communicate with the council, do not indicate their needs, but the needs are there just the same, health-wise, in terms of housing, in terms of having generally affordable homes. So the local plan looks at that and actually does quantitative and real research about what the real living conditions are in the borough to try and actually tackle some of those problems. And yes, middle-class Hanwell and whatever can write lots of emails and actually come to us and say, we want this, we want that. We don't get that same level of input from places like Southall or Northolt or other places where those communities need that investment. So I think it's really important. And yes, many members of the community come here as refugees. And Chair, I think I probably am the only one on this table that came to this country as a refugee, as a 10-year-old. And I understand clearly what communities that come here and settle need. And I think it's us to balance those sort of needs around nature reserve. Yes, it's welcome. We do need to look at climate change and look at trying to tackle some of those issues, but we also need to tackle health, overcrowding, providing homes for people to live in that they can afford to pay for. So we have to balance it. And this is why we are tasked with managing how the borough is governed, because we're elected and we have to make those difficult choices. We can't please all the people all the time, but I think this Councillor Costigan has brought forward a report that seeks to balance that, and we will have further work on this report as we move forward. But I do think it tackles both issues in a fair way, and I think I will obviously support it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Raza.
Thank you, Chair. As the Cabinet Member for Tackling Inequalities, I think this report really sets out in stark black and white what the main issues are in our borough, but particularly in Southall and in around this area. One of our main council priorities has been to tackle inequality. And these include health inequalities that we've heard about from Councillor Blacker, and also working with the young people, and the comments that Councillor Nagpal has made as well, for wanting to not end up repeating everything that people have said. But a lot of the resources available to our young people seem to be all bunched up in central Ealing, and what we need desperately, and young people have told us over and over again about how much they need these facilities. What's also become really apparent at the course of this evening has been the need for both, yes, sports facilities, very important. We do need them for our health, and to encourage areas like Southall into expanding their horizons into what sort of things they can do to improve their health, both physical and mental. And some of those are obviously to be able to access natural spaces, which is also what we are setting out today in the report. So I welcome the fact that we have this ambitious plan to deliver both. And that also, I was very pleased to hear from Councillor Costigan today that it will be a work which will be working with local people. This is a suggestion. This is the beginning of actually a very exciting opportunity for the whole of the community to build something that we can be really proud of, and that can really, really tackle the inequality that we see. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mahfouz. Thank you, Chair. So I've been to the site many times, and I've been there with my children, and I think it's quite, what you've got there is two very stark parts of the site. So one is fantastic green open space, which I'd be very proud of approving our proposals tonight, which would be turning that into a recognised nature reserve. And very starkly, compared to that, you have what Councillor Donnelly has already referred to, but quite frankly, could only be described as a great backdrop for a crime thriller drama, in terms of right in the middle of that site. And I look at that site both as a parent of a football mad child. I look at that site as a councillor of an incredibly deprived and ward within the borough, with significant health inequalities, such as this part of the borough that we're trying to support the proposals that we have. And also I look at it as the former lead for Let's Go Southall. And Councillor Manro talks about figures. And the one that really sticks in my mind is that when we did a survey of Southall residents in terms of physical activity levels, that showed that 4 in 9, that's almost 45% of people living in Southall, almost 45% of people living in Southall were not only not physically active, they were basically physically inactive. They did less than 5 minutes of physical activity a day. They were physically inactive. When you've got almost half of that population, no wonder to being born tonight and going back to Southall has a life expectancy of less than 10 years on somebody who goes back to another part of the borough. We can't sit here with a moral conscience and not want to do something about that. And so going forward, we know that there is a significant deficiency of sports facilities in Southall. We know that there are significant health inequalities in Southall. We know that there is a significant mass of number of people who are physically inactive, and we have to do something about that. And this is a site that was dedicated to that for so many years and is now sitting derelict and needs some love and attention in all the ways that we are suggesting to do so tonight. And so this promise through the report to deliver that rewilding on over half the site and support the habitat of the wonderful wildlife that we've got here, alongside bringing back what is critically needed community sports facilities on this site, can only, from my eyes, be something that I can see as a real win-win, and something that I would wholeheartedly support on the recommendations this evening. I thank Cabinet members for their responses and their contributions. I think all I'd really add is that when I took over as the leader 18 months ago, I made it very clear in one of my first public communications that it was the aspiration of the collected administration, the new administration of the council, that we would try to find a compromise, a win-win, both for rewilding of a significant piece of land, but also the provision of much needed sports facilities. That was done in a context in which we knew the previous plans had failed. And not just failed insofar as that Queen's Park Rangers removed themselves from a fully inspected plan, but that plan in and of itself was a bad plan. In the context of austerity, of course, councils have to take very difficult decisions, but a plan that would have imported hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of soil to level off a site in order to give it over to a professional football club for their almost exclusive use seemed to me from day one to be a mistake that we absolutely needed to avoid. And rather than setting a limitation of our ambition simply for the Warren Farm site given to the council as early as 1920 by the Countess of Jersey for the provision of sports, that we didn't simply limit our ambition to the site of Warren Farm itself, but we looked northwest to Imperial College and we looked southeast to the Earl of Jersey, and that we begun with them a conversation that sought to rewild not just an element of Warren Farm, but also each of their land. And so began discussions and negotiations directly with Imperial College and with the Earl of Jersey, in which we won one argument. And unfortunately, we didn't win the other. I remain committed to those negotiations to ensure that we do indeed convince the Earl of Jersey that a scrappy bit of land that he currently has, with horses free to roam, not really accessible and not really usable in a way that it ought to be in terms of its rewilding, is brought into the mix. And that rather than it being a question of, I believe, 38% sports and 62% rewilding, that those metrics could be extended even more. Because the reality is we've been very clear at every stage of this process over the last 18 to 20 months in all of our communications about what our aspirations for Warren Farm has been, because we as an administration are absolutely clear that we do have the dual challenges. Number one, of doing something about the climate emergency. That doesn't just speak to our plans at Warren Farm, but it also speaks to our plans to rewild a significant degree of our borough, to introduce 10 new parks, and to do everything that we can to retrofit and green our buildings, our fleet, our transports, and clean our air. But doing that at the same time that we face an equally important emergency in the stark inequalities that exist in our borough. If you're a woman that lives in Northfields, you will live on average 10 years more than women living in Norwood Green. That is a stark inequality that exists in our borough that we often don't talk about because sometimes it can be too inconvenient in the division of our resources and the division of our land and the division of our focus. It is as an important emergency as the one that we face in our climate, because it remains unjust that we perpetuate that situation. And that is why those dual challenges are so central to the administration's approach in all of the decisions that we take about land, about resources, about strategy. It should not have had to be the case that Chloe Kelly learnt to play football on a caged Muga 600 meters away by the stage that she took up football from a dilapidated, out of use sports ground. It is fantastic that we have a lioness from this borough who is able to lift a UEFA Cup. But I do wonder if that sports facility had been in place for the last 15 years, how many more Chloe Kellys this borough would have produced. I look forward to a day after we've gone through the process of ensuring that all legal I's are dotted and all ecological T's are crossed, that we can move forward to celebrating a big compromise and a big win-win. And perhaps in a few years' time, we'll be welcoming Chloe Kelly to the ribbon cutting of the Chloe Kelly playing fields. And perhaps we can also welcome the Countess of Jersey to the ribbon cutting of the Lady Jersey Nature Reserve. I commend the report to Cabinet. I direct you to the recommendations in the report, and I ask that they are agreed. Thank you very much. The date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 22nd of February, and I conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.